Prices of grains in Adamawa have gone down owing to scarcity of Naira in the hands of buyers and traders. Now, with this development, weekly markets in the state are wearing empty looks with low turnout of would-be buyers. Now, Salis Loan visits some weekly markets and files in this report.
It is not the usual busy market day for these traders, as most of the market activities are at standstill due to non-availability of cash to transact business. Traders here are just counting losses almost on daily basis. A bag of maize that was sold between 20 and 22,000 naira last 3 weeks is now selling between 17,000 and 14,000 naira or even 12,000 naira depending on the transactions, transfer, cash of old or new currency. While some are not happy with the development, calling quick review of the policy, others say it is a welcome development.
When we talk of the cashless policy, actually it affects us much, in the sense that when you go to remote area, when you have no cash, nobody will give you his own goods. So as a result of that, you will just come out with nothing, because they are not accepting transfer. And most of the remote areas, not just they are not accepting it, they have no network. Where you even find network, the network is not very bad.
Mun samu kalubale da dama a wajen wannan da aka samu yanzu, ko mun samu asarori da dama ma a wannan firma da ta faru yanzu. Akalla a sati ina cire kuɗi sama naira miliyan 100-150. An waye gari yanzu a sati baka samu naira 20,000 a banki.
I used to buy rice, soya beans and other grains worth millions of naira before. But with this new policy, I hardly buy goods because of lack of cash. Our business require cash. We're in serious trouble.
Komi ya sauko ƙasa yanzu. Za mu sha wuya amma daɗi ya zo. Don haka wannan gyaran da yayi alhamdulillah, za mu ji daɗi mu talakoki.
For me, this policy is good, and it will never come at a better time than now. May Allah bless President Buhari for implementing the policy. We are now buying foodstuff at lower price. Transporters also have their own side of story as regard to challenges and new wave of hardship caused by the CBN Naira redesign and cashless policy.
Fasinja ya zo yana son ya tafi, rashin canjin nan da aka ce an yi canji babu kuɗi a ƙasa. Sakamako in aka yi transfer babu network mai kyau wanda zaka ga transfer din.
This policy has brought actually nothing to us but untold hardship. We don't like it. Our businesses are on standstill. If really they want our votes and peace of this country to continue, let them review the policy.
Passenger zo maka a transfer, kai kuma gidan mai su ba su karban transfer sai cash. To gaskiya wannan canjin kuɗin da aka mana canjin makeri ne.
They said we have to be cashless society. What have they put in place to achieve that? Some passengers will come here and suggest making transfer, but the network is not there. If you go to ATM for withdrawals, long queues, fuel stations, queues, I don't understand. Although Central Bank of Nigeria said the redesigned denominations of 200, 500 and 1,000 naira notes, a new limit on the large withdrawals, is aimed at curbing money laundering, observers say the timing is wrong. From Yola, Salis Lawan, Trust TV News.
As Gombe residents battle scarcity of the redesigned Naira notes, the Central Bank of Nigeria has met senior officials of commercial banks operating in Gombe State. Now speaking to newsmen, CBN Deputy Director of Financial Markets, Aliyu Ashuru, said the meeting with commercial banks is to ensure smooth circulation of newly redesigned Naira notes across the state.
Recalls, I think there has been some changes to the guidelines of the implementation of the policy. There is now an OTC transaction, I mean over-the-counter payment of 20,000 naira. So it's these modifications that we have called them, discussed with them, let them understand the process and then how it works. Basically, there is a ratio that we advise them to follow for all the cash that they have collected. A ratio of 40% for payment through their agents, 30% for payment over the counter, and 30% to be loaded onto their ATM machine. We've come here so that we'll give the banks money, at least let them not stay over the weekend without having cash in their ATMs, one, and then secondly, we want them to pay the first customer at 8 a.m. tomorrow, Monday, when they open their businesses.
Are there sanctions to any bank over these new directives?
Would there be sanctions?
Would there be sanctions?
Naturally, there are sanctions, and they come in many ways for any bank that flouts, the content of the guidelines that you have given.
All right, so right now in the studio we have the manager, Learning and Development, Lux Terra Leadership Foundation, Mr. Henry Ijoma, and he is also a public affairs analyst joining us to share his thoughts on the lingering crisis. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Daybreak this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right, good morning. All right, so my question is, a lot of people have said that, some people have said that this Naira redesign policy is good for the economy, it has long-term benefits and the rest of it. But we feel the crunch now, and we see what people are going through, and we are going through it as well. Those benefits that we're talking about, are they really worth this, what we're going through now?
Yeah, I think in the long run, the benefits are huge for us if we have an open mind to the change that has been proposed. The hardships, no doubt, we could see from all the images and from the experiences of people that many people are going through a lot of stress. But I think that is something that is within the core of the issue, because I think that the Naira Notes redesign has not been properly communicated to Nigerians. It's really not the end itself. It's only a means to achieving something more important and urgent. But people are seeing the Naira redesign as the end of it. Oh, so we have redesigned Naira, let's swap it. That's not the point. The CBN and the government is targeting to achieve something more. And there are two basic things that the redesign leads to. First is to mop up money from outside the banks, to get more money into the banking system. So the statistic is that the money outside the banking system is much more than what is within the banking system, and that is not good for security, that is not good for the economy. Then secondly, you want a change in culture, a huge change in culture on how people use money. So that in itself are the two major reasons why the redesign was. The redesign is the, how do I call it now, the launch pad to achieving those two major objectives. So I think that the communication should actually change to get people to understand what the aim is, more than discussing just the redesign.
Isn't that too late in the game right now?
Yeah, I think that's where the issue is, because for every change program, you need to communicate well enough to the people that they even desire the change because they understand it, and because a lot of people have not understood it, they are resisting it, and they could see the hardship more than what it means for them. So they react based on the hardship they feel, and because of that, you get all these kind of challenges. So a lot of people are rushing to go and queue because, so I saw even the most of the headlines, the word used is Naira swap, currency swap. Is it really currency swap? No, it's not. We are not expected to swap what we have. Move your money to the bank and use alternative methods to do transaction. Not as though the cash will not be available anyway, but the CBN wants the volume of cash that is available to be drastically reduced. So if I had ₦1 million in cash and I want to go to the bank to deposit 1 million, I should not be expecting to withdraw 1 million. That's the point. But a lot of people are expecting to do value for value, amount for amount.
Okay, so you talked about, people rejecting the new Naira, redesign. But don't you think that if these new Naira notes were actually available and not scarce, that these issues won't even occur in the first place?
Okay, so that's the point again. There are two reasons why it is scarce. First is the deliberate effort by the regulator to ensure that what you have in circulation is not the same like it used to be. So, and that's where they're missing the mark, because you communicate to people about the redesign, and you speak about the redesign as though you are just changing the currency. You have just done the redesign as a means of attracting people to make the deposits. So actually what we should have been communicating to people will be to encourage people to return what they have to the bank, right? Beyond that, of course, a lot of people who had the initial opportunity to get most of the new notes, out of fear that they don't want to have the old notes side by side, they keep all the new notes and continue to spend the old notes. So even individuals are hoarding what they have already collected. A lot of people are not spending what they have collected. So that's why the scarcity is even increasing.
All right, and now if we go by what you just said right now, that it's a means to an end, this particular thing, and I believe a lot of people don't know that.
Absolutely.
Just like a lot of people don't know that it's not a cash swap thing. They want you to go and deposit your money into the bank so that the money can be in the banking system, and you look for alternatives. So if we go by that, and we go by the fact that we need to find alternative ways of doing business, of transacting business, which is electronic mostly. You do transfers, you use the POS and the rest of it. That means we have a long way to go before we can think of starting things like this, because right now we don't even believe we have the infrastructure to do that. A couple of days ago, people were up in arms because you were sending transfers, the transfers were not going, monies were being deducted, they were not coming back. You go to the POS, transactions are being declined. You have money, but you can't use it. So are we really ready for this?
Well, there's enough blame in the basket to go around every stakeholder, but CBN being in the middle of this has a lot more to take. The cashless policy had started for many, many years. Actually, I was still working in the bank when the cashless policy started. I'd left the banking system for 5 years. But the cashless policy had not successfully permeated to all the nooks and crannies of Nigeria, because you left it within the urban cities and you did not have any program to ensure that you gradually moved it into the areas where cash transactions were really heavy. From the interviews we just watched from your reporter, you see that some places, they are still doing predominantly cash-based transactions. Those would have been the target of long-term conversation, long-term sensitization, so that the people move gradually into the new system. So I think that's where the real challenge is. The policy itself is not so much of a bad thing, but the manner in which it has been implemented had led to many challenges and hardship that people are facing. So when I said that if you are trying to bring a change in culture, the people need to know, they need to understand it, and they need to desire it, so they look forward to it, because you need them. The policy is not for the CBN, it's for the people. You want people to use alternative means, so they should be well aware. And of course, the technological dimension is there. There are issues of bandwidth, whether the banks actually have enough bandwidth to sustain the surge, because we see that in the last 1 week, many people are complaining of using their bank apps and all that, because actually there was more traffic on those channels than they used to be in the last 1 month or thereabout, when people had continued to rely on the use of cash. So some of those issues are things that stakeholders would have continuously worked on gradually to ensure that you face into this as easily as possible. When change comes and people don't suffer so much because of it, they tend to absorb it, they tend to welcome it more. So the resistance you see outside is because of the bottlenecks that have come with it. And I say this with regards to many more policy changes that will happen, that we need to be a little more gradual, we need to be a little more sensitive to our environment, and ensure that the people understand what we are doing before we launch it.
Okay, now compared to what you've actually said and the objectives of these Naira redesign, some people seem to believe, or even some reports and some newspapers have actually carried headlines on the fact that instead of making things better, this redesigned policy has actually worsened the economy and also the security challenges, facing the economy.
Well, depending on where the arguments are coming from, there are so many sides to this. The person who would say that it has worsened the security situation
inflation
may have their reasons, but flip it a little, it may have more positive implications for security than when we had so much cash. The banditry that we witnessed was because people had the opportunity to move cash as much as hundreds of millions. Then you talk about inflation. The reason why there is inflation is, inflation is high because there's so much cash chasing goods, as it were. But in truth, what we are considering to be the cash chasing the goods are not available for the people to spend. So we have been in a prolonged period of hardship. Inflation happens when there's so much money in circulation and people are chasing fewer goods. But in actual fact, in our circumstance in Nigeria, is that that cash that we assume to be outside chasing the goods actually stacked somewhere are not being used. So you actually have it's a false inflation in some sense. So it has driven it up further now because it has affected the real persons who are supposed to supply goods. That's where the challenge you raised came from. So some of these persons in hinterlands who need to transport their goods from farms really may not be using POS, really may not be using bank transfers. Some of those persons rely on cash. So their movement has somehow been hampered. So if you see this surge in inflation in the last few weeks, it is because the real suppliers of goods have suffered the consequence of not having cash to do their business. And that is why some of those persons would have been an early target of the conversations, early target of the communication to ensure that they are well prepared to face the challenge that was coming.
All right, so we've established that, just what you talked about right now, we've already established that the ball was dropped when it comes to sensitization and giving the required information, especially to the public. And then we talked about the issue of bandwidth, having the right, the capacity to deal with large volumes of transactions which were going on bank apps and the rest of them. So if the CBN failed to sensitize the public properly on this, did they fail to sensitize the bankers as well? Were they not ready? Couldn't they see this coming? Because if we're going towards a cashless society, and we want to go cashless, definitely, electronic transfers will be the next way to go. Couldn't they have done something about it if they saw it coming?
Well, but from all indications, I don't think the CBN actually did anything with the
banks as well.
With the banks as well. It looked like everybody was informed about the same time. Maybe for some peculiar reasons, for security reasons and otherwise that we may not know. This discussion held between some very few individuals, very few stakeholders, and the public and the banks obviously got that information at about the same time. There may be other peculiar things that the CBN is looking at that they want to forestall in any case, that they decided to keep the information, to withhold the information until the time when they were ready. So they gave a little window of opportunity. That may, I don't want to presume completely, but it may not be unconnected with the fact that there are lots of cash out there that are proceeds of criminal enterprise. And you may want that value that the people hold from, they have gained from those criminal enterprise to become useless and worthless in their hands. So that in itself could have informed that very short window of period for which that information was made available.
Okay.
Right. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So now we've seen the redesigned policy marred by people selling the new Naira notes. A particular lady was arrested in Lagos, and even POS operators have actually said that they go to the banks and they buy these new Naira notes. Are there negative effects to buying or selling the new Naira notes?
You see, currency, every currency is a national symbol and is supposed to be respected. If we isolate the case in point now where people are selling these redesigned Naira notes, we will be unfair to the public. Because actually, Naira notes have been sold in this country regularly. When you go to venues of parties in many cities, they sell, people hawk the Naira note. And that is something that should have been addressed long ago. So I don't see it coming just because of the redesign. It did not start now. Even in Abuja, along the express road around Day and the likes, sometimes you see people holding the new Naira notes in parks, waiting to sell it to those who are going for events and parties. So it's been a culture that had been in Nigeria, and we had not really addressed it. People need to know how to value national symbols, and the Naira is one of it, including spraying it in parties. A lot of people, so why do people look for those new notes? Because they want to spray it in parties. So what you are doing is that you take something that is new, that has been minted to ensure that it has, some sort of, how do I call it now, prestige. You pick it and deface it almost immediately. Some people in churches and otherwise where they want to make offertory, you pick a new note that is clean straight and they squeeze it before they drop it in the box. That's not the idea. So I think we need some level of reorientation to allow people to understand that this is a national value, this is a national, is an item that represents our identity, and we should give it some form of respect. And you know, because of the hardship as well, people want to be innovative in some sense. So everybody will want to cash out on the opportunities that has been presented to them, whether it is morally right or otherwise.
All right, so just quickly before we go, you made a statement earlier that caught my attention. You said there's enough blame to go around the stakeholders, but but most of it lies in the front of the CBN. But for a very long time, the CBN has been pushing that particular blame towards commercial banks, saying that they have enough currencies, the banks are hoarding this, the banks are doing that. And we've seen some videos surface online of some banks actually keeping these new Naira notes, not putting them in ATMs and the rest of it. Just quickly, what do they stand to gain if they do hoard these new Naira notes?
Yeah, so that's about the politics of it. So I heard someone saying, and that's the right thing to say, that so when the CBN says that there's money in the banks, how much volume? What's the volume you say is in the bank? Same volume as what you are mopping up from the banks? No. So they have does not mean that they have so much that they have enough to really go around. And that is why even with the introduction of the over-the-counter transfer, cash payment, the limit is very small. Because it's not like the banks have so much volume. And by the way, the CBN cannot just say that the banks have it, go to the banks. Because they receive daily report of cash positions of every bank. Daily reports. So even the statistics that they brandish to tell us that the funds, the cash outside the banking system was more than what is in the banking system, it's because they rely on the reports that they get from the banks. So, and even now that the real cash swap is actually in CBN, when the commercial banks go to deposit the old notes, they are expected to withdraw the new notes from CBN. So you know the volume that you have paid out. And they give you a report on a daily basis. Every bank will generate report of their cash position on a daily basis, and they file it. So you know how much has been paid out and how much that they have.
Okay. All right, well, I think with that, we'll be wrapping up this discussion. Thank you so much, Mr. Henry, for joining us on this discussion this morning.
Thank you so much.